Yeah, so music was definitely a part of everyday life because we have to look back to and think back to what music really was and is. Music is a form of communication. It's a form of celebration. It's a form of expressing sorrow and grief, and it's a form of worship too. And all those things, right, come together and they create. If maybe create's not the right word, but they are an expression of both individuals and families and communities. So before the advent of radios, because we can think it's not necessarily been that long ago, just 100 years ago, which sounds really long, but in the timeline of music and musical development and technology, it's pretty recent. That if you wanted to listen to music, you had to purchase it somehow, or really, for most of our history, you had to go listen to live music somewhere. So if you wanted to make music, if you wanted to experience music, or if you wanted to listen to music, if you didn't go, you had to make that music. Music is such a great way to release as well. At the end of the day, it's a great way to just kind of set your burdens down or maybe express those in a way that just words don't do that. And because it's an art form, different people can approach it from different perspectives in different ways, which is great, and why we have so many different musical expressions and forms in the United States, of course, but also in the Appalachian region, because the music of Fred and Clint and Doc and people like Frank Prophet and our very local musicians, they might have shared experiences of those, say, even down around Knoxville or Chattanooga or up closer to Kentucky, but yet it's different. Right. Yet it's different because it's speaking to their sorrows and woes and joyful experiences too.
Black smoke's rising and it surely is a train, and I'm on my long journey home. Lost all my money but a $2 bill, $2 bill, boys, $2 bill. Lost all my money but a $2 bill, and I'm on my long journey home. Cloudy in the west and it looks like rain, boys, looks like rain. Cloudy in the west and it looks like rain, and I'm on my long journey home. Lost all my money but a $2 bill, $2 bill, boys, $2 bill. Lost all my money but a $2 bill, and I'm on my long journey home. Lost all my money but a $2 bill, $2 bill, boys, $2 bill. Lost all my money but a $2 bill, and I'm on my long journey home.
Sick and lonesome and I'm feeling kinda blue, boys, feeling kinda blue. I'm getting lonely man, I'm feeling kinda blue, and I'm on my long journey home.
Lost all my money but a $2 bill, $2 bill, boys, $2 bill. Lost all my money but a $2 bill, and I'm on
the book. It's titled Bread in the Bone. And it has the theory, proposes the theory that certain cultural traits become so ingrained within a person or an individual that they become part of their persona. And there's a lot of debate about that, but I really like that term, especially when we talk about traditional folk music, music of the folk. So not necessarily the folk revival, but the people that were playing this music as part of their everyday expression, as part of their everyday work life, as part of their worship life as well. That their experiences, their family connections, their work history, again, their religious overtones and their religious theologies, which is so important, all comes together, and through music they can express that in very unique and special ways. And you can't really separate the person from the music because they're so intertwined and ingrained, because music is such this culturally complex phenomenon that's both shared and both very private and individual. And I think the people that we are talking about, right, Fred and Clint, and our local musicians that maybe never recorded, that was their way both of expressing themselves but also of viewing the world and how the world could view and experience them. And thankfully, through technology, right, we can share that with the world, which they were able to do. And it goes back to, again, authenticity. These were authentic people playing music that they enjoyed to play. They enjoyed playing. They would pick the songs that they liked, the tunes that they liked, and then they would share it with people. I think it's pretty accurate to think that music was so common, and musical instruments were. But probably not every family. I know, talking to my grandparents and great-grandparents, they didn't play. And their theory, I guess their life philosophy, because they told me, was, yeah, it's great to play music as soon as your work's done, but for them, their work was never done. So they didn't play, but they enjoyed listening to people that did. And they would also sing. We also have to remember that maybe even they weren't musical instrument-wise, people would sing for well as part of that. But that is also a really great thing about this region, and it's fun to talk to people that are used to a little bit more classically trained, like notes on paper. That's like, well, how did you learn this tune? I said, I learned it from my neighbor. I learned it from my father or grandfather, because it's all by ear and experience, learning that. And that's how still the vast majority of musicians that play this type of music learn it and express it, and then also share it. Because you learn it and you don't keep it, you share it. And if I share it with you, you're going to play it just a little bit different than me, but we're going to still identify that tune as the one that I taught you. And I've even experienced where maybe teach someone a tune, and then we come back to play it together, and then what we create together is just a little bit different than either one of us can do separately, right? Because it's that communication again. And if nothing else, it's because it was fun, right? Especially this dance music, an opportunity to get up and dance, because dance is a form of musical expression too. Because I know a lot of people that don't play music, but they love to dance. So the opportunity to, again, experience music through so many ways, through the intellectual, through the physical, and sometimes the spiritual realm. So people like Fred and Clint, we probably would consider them professional musicians to a certain degree, but they were farmers and they were bus drivers, and they worked what we think is just very common blue-collar jobs through the day. And then music is something that they did, I think, kind of, and I don't want to get too kind of crazy about it, but I think music was kind of their release, kind of them to be, and maybe a really important part of self-expression that they could do outside of the farm work, outside the public work, you might say. That's just solely and totally them. And I think that comes through with the music. It goes back to our thoughts of authenticity and why their music resonates so much with the people in this region, so much with their neighbors, because they did the same things every day as we did. Right? Everybody was kind of common to a certain degree. We hear that term a lot. They were just common. We could delve into that a little bit, but they were just like me and you, but their form of self-expression was this tremendous musical ability that they were able to really take and express themselves in such a way, both with their virtuosity, because they're tremendous, just musicians, just their ability to make the music. We just could strip all of it away, their virtuosity, which I can't say that word, their ability to make notes, which sounds terrible, right? But then how they could express that, right? Because anybody can make the notes, but they could make the music. Right? They could make the music.
You get a line, I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line, I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line, I'll get a pole. We'll go down to the crawdad hole, honey, baby of mine. Sit on the bank till my feet got cold, honey. Sit on the bank till my feet got cold, babe. Sit on the bank till my feet got cold. It's the sight to see the crawdad hole, honey, baby of mine. You get a line, I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line, I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line, I'll get a pole. We'll go down to the crawdad hole, honey, baby of mine. Honey, baby of mine.
So I think we could start a discussion about the concept of place as early as the 1920s. And let's start with Bristol, right? 1927 Bristol. And then let's move through to Depression, right? This changing and shifting of people, especially tremendous in Appalachia. We actually gained in population in this region during the Great Depression, because people that in the 20s had moved out to work, industrial, they began to move back as their jobs were lost. So we had actually a net plus a net gain in our population in the 30s. By the 40s, we have World War II. We have tremendous amounts of what we would call and refer to as modernization during and particularly after, right? So the wartime industries, that booming wartime and post-wartime industries, people would start to leave the mountains en masse again by the 1940s and 50s. Interestingly enough, this is also the time we see the development of bluegrass and some commercialization and things like that. By the 60s, we have the counterculture, and we're looking at roots music again. And it begins this really unique dynamic, this foment of home, right? We have, so what is home? And you have people like Fred and Clint and Doc, and Doc's father-in-law, Gaither Carlton, and the Walsh, and some of these people that recorded in the 20s, and then they're the next generation, and they're singing about home. Right, they're singing, and their music is the music of home. So if you're in the late 40s, maybe you went to war, and maybe you found some work in Detroit, and you're working, and by the 50s and 60s, when this music really starts to become popular and it starts to get pushed out to the masses, you're hearing people that you might have heard back at home in Johnson County, Tennessee, or in Boone, North Carolina, or maybe in West Virginia, or up in eastern Kentucky. And there's always this pull of home. I think for most people, we have a home. We have a home place. And when you hear people that represent home, right, I think it takes you back maybe just a little bit to those good memories, right? So what is home? And this music for so many people that had moved away for work, moved away for different reasons, this authentic music by authentic people who were not stage performers in the professional sense, so they had a great stage presence, but they could play Carnegie Hall one weekend and then be back home cutting tobacco the next, right? So that's this connection, this authentic connection to home. And Appalachia has such a tremendous history, a convoluted history of people moving in and moving out, and people trying to make a living here and maybe not, and moving, but there's like the home place, like the old home place. So maybe times weren't great, maybe times were hard financially, but it's home. And music is a way of remembering home and expressing maybe some grief at having to leave, but also those good memories of what home meant, right? With the family, with grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles, extended family, and how all that ties into, those good old days back at home. Because if we fast forward to the bluegrass scene, how many of those songs are about home, right? And the mountains, right? Because they have such a large part, again, of our persona and our identity. And I think even if you're not from here, and there's so many people that are not from here, they can feel that too, right? They feel it, and it almost becomes this kind of, not mystical place, but this like, everybody's home, to a certain degree, right? It's like everybody wants to come here, right? Because it is tremendous. It is so rich in the people, and our culture, and our environment, and it's just such a wonderful place to be, and that you can't help but feel that and sense that through the music. And these people that are really such tremendous examples of what true folk music is, right? Because you can't separate it, all the smells, right? The food, what they hear, like all that becomes ingrained in our persona. And a true folk performer, someone that can really express that, is someone that can internalize that and in some ways express that in the music, right? So it goes again to feel and someone using someone's gifts and being able to express, maybe in a song that has nothing to do with farm work or nothing to do with driving a bus or living in the mountains, but it calls to people, right? Because they can sense that. And it's not intentional, it's not manipulation, it's just that person expressing themselves in the one way that they are their true selves. That just resonates, and that has resonated across the globe with this type of music.